Welcome to the Thriving Farmer Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Kilpatrick. Our mission is to inspire, educate, and celebrate sustainable farming. We believe that you can build a profitable, sustainable farm that gives you true farm freedom. Join us as we talk to farmers, innovators, educators, and entrepreneurs to glean their top takeaways in business and life. Hey, Thriving Farmers, Michael Kilpatrick here from the Thriving Farmer Podcast. Today on the podcast, I am joined by Rodger Wasson, who is from Farm to Table Talk podcast in Idea Farming. So we actually interview each other on this show, so it's a little bit different format, but it's a fascinating listen, and I had a ton of fun, and we're going to try to do it again if you guys will let us. So welcome to the podcast, Rodger Wasson.
No, welcome each other. This is always, now when you do this, one of us has to decide who we're going to be leading off with. But I think the thing that, Michael, I want to say that I'm so impressed with the space that you're in. You look at the kind of the whole world of people being interested in farming and making more money farming, you're getting started farming, and you're offering services to them. Kind of explain that a little bit more about your podcast and the programs that you're involved with.
Yeah, Rodger. So we believe that anyone can farm, and we believe that farmers can and should make money at it. And my background is that we spent a decade in upstate New York. We started, my brother and I, at 15 and 16. We had no idea what we were doing. We met great mentors. We learned business. We implemented marketing, and we blew that business up to feeding hundreds and hundreds of families every single week in the upstate New York region. And that's what we brought to this company. When I started this company, is I watched the people that took over our farm literally bankrupt it within a dozen months. And that was heartbreaking for me because of what we built. But it also showed me that you can have everything going for you, the perfect land, this perfect equipment, the perfect markets, because again, I left this massive hole in the industry, and it takes the business side of farming to make it work. So that's why we exist. That's what we do. Now we help farmers all around the world build successful, profitable businesses. We focus on banishing those limiting beliefs that farmers have. We help them hire teams. We help them figure out the systems and the enterprise budgets. We help them figure out how to get financing. So that's kind of what we do, is we really focus on the business side of farming. Not that we don't also say, here's the best way to grow carrots, because while you're focusing on the business side of farming, you get all that information from the feedback. It's like, this is what's working right now. And so we're passing that all over when we share with farmers. But that's basically how we operate and how we built the business.
Well, right off the bat, one thing that's very different, I think, about your journey and my journey is that I think I was making a conscious decision to leave the farm. When I graduated from high school, I was like the first Wasson in 1,000 years, and I think that might be literally true, to not be a farmer. And at the time, I went off to college, and I thought I was going to do anything else other than that. And yet what I found is, as I was studying communications and radio, television, and so forth, I happened to get a job right out of college that was doing sales and kind of on the track to do management and broadcasting. And a farm show came available. And I started doing this farm show. I had an hour at noon and an hour early in the morning.
Okay.
And I reestablished the fact that I love people that are in farming. And it's special. And after, I guess people can feel the same way about people that run shoe stores or grocery stores or all sorts of things, but I didn't. I found that speaking for farmers and about what farmers were doing was what made me exciting. So I was kind of making a decision then. I thought, I'm going to take a vow of poverty and have no chance of making any money, but I'm going to follow my dream, which is to be able to speak for farmers. And lo and behold, I get this series of jobs running associations of farmers. And so I've worked with beef industry and the pork industry and the sheep industry and the strawberry industry and the almond industry. And each one of those were usually people recruiting me away from my other job to say, come and work in our industry. So in that process, I've been to 49 states, seeing farms, and dozens of countries, and meeting with people that are also trying to make a living farming. And so So I'm always an observer. It's one of those things. I can keep talking to people about their farming, but I don't have the inclination and probably all the other things it takes to do it myself. So I think it's a fair criticism to say I'm sitting on the sidelines where you've actually been in the middle of it. You've actually done it.
Yeah.
And so I'm sharing, other people saying what they do, but you've had that experience of you've had hands on yourself. And so you've got a lot more credibility than I do if you start telling people about ways that they can be approaching their farming.
Well, but I think, the thing, Rodger, is that our movement, our industry needs people on all parts. And you've come in at a very different take of being able to run these associations. And actually, the question I had for you was, talk to me a little bit about, like, let's say an association, what's their goal? What's their focus to do? Is it with almonds? Is it to increase people eating almonds, or just the awareness of them? Or what's that goal?
The thing that has really appealed to me is that in working with these associations and councils and boards, people step up and say that they need to do something to help their overall industry and work with others that believe that they can do something that makes a difference for everyone. And it's usually an act of sacrifice, because it's a farmer or a rancher who oftentimes would rather stay home, and maybe have to stay home and work on the farm. But instead, at the time, it was before they could hop on Zooms, they had to hop on a plane and go to a national meeting or something. But they often sacrificed a great deal. And I've seen in the years past, I've seen farmers that nearly lost their farms because they were too much involved with the politics of the industry. And yet I found that so encouraging, that people would do something other than for their personal satisfaction or wealth, but with the belief that we all owe it to each other. We all have to work together. And then, so what my job would be to facilitate that with staff and programs. And then it's either to sometimes address a regulation, a rule, a law, or to change the demand for a product. Because like almonds said, when I went to almonds, people said you should never eat almonds. They're terrible for you. And in fact, we did a survey of cardiologists, and these cardiologists said that you should not eat nuts because they were high in cholesterol. Well, there's no cholesterol in nuts because they're not an animal product. But the thing is that most doctors don't have to take a single course in nutrition. So the farmers would say, well, how are we going to tell them to do a difference? And no one could do it by themselves. But if they came together, they were able to change an attitude. And in fact, they did change demand.
Yeah. And now almonds are, using what percentage of California's water?
Well, they use a lot. But they don't use any more than most other products do. And what happens is in California, where we don't get any rain to speak of, almost anything needs almost 4 acre feet of water. Like if you took 4 foot high and had that cover an acre, that's how much almost any crop takes. It varies just a little bit.
So basically an inch a week throughout the entire year, almost.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
But I guess what I'm saying is that it's just expanded the almond. Like we buy almond milk. And then like a dozen years ago, you wouldn't even have thought about that.
Right.
So that whole aspect of things is that it's just incredibly grown, and that being able to, as a board or as an association, affect that change and make these farmers viable and profitable again.
Well, in fact, when I came to work for them, that there were 300 million pounds of almonds produced.
Okay.
And today they're really, really close to 3 billion pounds of almonds produced.
Wow.
From 300 million to 3 billion. And that's been driven by demand. And they export nearly 70% of it's exported around the world. And an awful lot of it can come back to just the image of almonds that has changed. And that has been done by almond farmers and their processors. And they were the ones that stepped up and they said, let's tax ourselves, and we'll use that money to advertise, promote, and more importantly, do lots of research on the effects of consuming almonds. So it works in so many commodities. I've done it with other commodities as well, but that an individual couldn't do it. So you've got individual farmers that are saying, okay, I'm going to produce whatever this particular product is. But if the image of that product or the science behind that product isn't there, no matter how tasty their product is, they're going to have a hard time getting certain consumers at their farmers market or at their farm to table restaurant or wherever else. And that's where they have to come together and work together in association with each other for their common good.
So yeah, you raise a very interesting point. And so I guess my question back to you would be, and I guess the thing is, like, most of our farmers are not raising just one crop. They're raising like a variety of vegetables, or they raise several different meats. So I guess what would be is, how do we take local food, because most of our farmers are selling local, and elevate that, I guess, I think. And I mean, obviously the USDA has worked on that, but it sounds like the kind of level that you have taken things to has been a whole different level than what, say, like the government spending can be for something like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the thing is that I think even whether you're local or say if you're selling within 100 miles, you still benefit from having research about that product and how it's good for you. So whatever the product, you can almost name any product at all and say, I sell it only to a farmer's market. I sell it only to this restaurant or only to this local supermarket. Unless there is science to back up the product that it's good for you in this way, other than just being delicious, then what you have to market in those cases, otherwise, other than this generic impact, is the fact that it's local, the fact that it's fresher, the fact that there are fewer steps between them and the chain, and oftentimes a more special type of breed or variety or a production system that is appealing to your targeted consumers. So I guess I feel like everybody owes it to be supportive of their broader industry, and then they also have it on their own to be able to work on those things that you can generate and develop your particular story. That's your unique story. That's appealing and authentic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think you're right. Is there's so many people that eat so many different things just for the health benefits. I mean, like kale. Who'd have thought kale would be a massive food, and again, most kale out there is not like something you're like chowing down because you love. It's something you're hiding in something else. But think of how many million pounds of kale are being sold because it's been put out there as that superfood.
Yeah. Well, it's so in your case with all these farmers that you're in contact with, I'm curious. How many of them are existing already, and how many are wannabes that saying, okay, I've got this job I hate, or I'm not making enough money, and I want to either start a farming operation on the side, or I really believe that the grass is greener on the other side, literally, and so I want to become a farmer. So how do you sort those out?
Yeah, so it's actually a really good, because we reach weekly around 50,000 farmers around the world, and I forget how many million impressions we have every year, but I think it's like 9 million impressions on through social media throughout the year. How many of them are? I would say we actually have a wide range. And again, I think it's the 80-20 rule, is that there's probably 20% of our audience that's actually like farming. And I would say the other 80% are, farming full time is what I would say. That the full incomes, or maybe even less the full income. But when we do our surveys, there's a fair amount that are, they're farming on the side. They're doing a couple things here and there, but it's not their full income. Or we have a lot of dreamers. We put them in a stage called the dreamer stage, which is a great stage to be in because you're just experimenting and trying everything out, or a support phase. So you're either like an extension agent, or you're like, you run your local farmers market, or, something like that. So we have a lot of those folks as well who are, cheering on the farmers in our communities. But yeah, it's a wide range, and it's fun to work with all the different stages. And what we've done is we've actually divided it into those 5 stages. So we got the dreamer, the beginner, the start phase, then we call the thriving phase, and then we call the mentor phase. So we actually have that stage at the end where they're very successful. The business is, making a full-time income, and they're actually ready to hand the reins to the next generation, or they're just actively doing education around farming because they believe in it, and they kind of just want the next person to succeed.
So I assume that almost a big share of those people that are the thriving and the more full-time, I imagine they started off as dreamers.
Oh, absolutely. We all did. And Rodger, I believe, because I feel like myself, that I'm back to that start phase or that beginner phase in our new farm that we're building out. So, I was at that mentor's, I don't know. I'd love to say I was teetering on the aspect of that mentor stage. We were definitely thriving, and we were educating. So I guess we would be into that mentor stage. But I guess I still revere my mentors as that mentor stage, as the ones that have been doing it for 30 years, and just they're the ones I call when I still have questions. But yeah, and so I feel like now I'm back to, especially as you change enterprises too, because like right now, we never grew mushrooms. That's the first enterprise we're starting here in Ohio on our new farm, is building out that mushroom facility, learning all about the different aspects. I'm actually paying consultants to talk to about, exactly how to set things up, and lots of night at YouTube and just research on the internet. So I feel like we can kind of go back and forth. I guess what I would say is that, you're also in the stage that you're in mentally. Is that, yes, obviously part of that stage is that, in the start phase, we say that the business is going to it's starting to support you. Okay. So like there's actually income coming in, and obviously you still may have more going out because you're still paying for capital investments, but you can see the needle moving on your assets to debt ratio, I guess is what I'm saying there. But I think so much of it is mental, because so many farmers, if they aren't in a good headspace, you can easily get derailed, or, well, they just won't buy it, so why should I bring it to the farmer's market? Or I just won't do it next year, it's too much work. When you look at the big picture and you start running your numbers, and that's why we're such a big believer in running those numbers and knowing your profit centers on your farm, of just that aspect of, oh my gosh, we are making, we are making space forward or progress forward in our farming journey.
It's hard for me to accommodate numbers and passion within under the same tent. Numbers just seems to be really practical and kind of boring to me.
Yeah.
But passion, I think that there's an awful lot of farmers that I know, farmers and ranchers, that they just love being outdoors. And they would like to make a living that they wouldn't have to be in an office someplace. And so part of that appeal is to be kind of outdoors and fresh air. I wonder what percentage do you think that that's an important criteria for people to get into it?
99%. We don't get into farming normally to be rich. I definitely know some farmers that drive BMWs and Lexuses because they've done a very good job throughout their careers. But I think we all get into it because we love one aspect of the farming lifestyle. I just love growing food.
That's another point I've been thinking about. Maybe we should stop referring to them as farmers, because what I'm thinking is that, well, what do they have in common? Because other than just the outdoors thing, because you can get greenhouses now, you can do, you can grow actually in your own house. You can, be able to put up the LED lights and everything and have your own small greens and all sorts of stuff like that you can grow right now. But maybe the term grower is also farming suggests that you are certainly planting the seeds, cultivating, harvesting and so forth. But also grower is that you're able to grow, again, in a greenhouse or in a hoop or in a large yard. It could be cattle, it could be lettuce,
Yeah.
Grower or producer.
So, that's a really interesting thing. And I'm glad you brought that up, because these are the conversations that my mentor had with me every once in a while. And he'd be like, someone told me, how's the garden growing? And he said, the farm's doing just fine. So it's really interesting how different people think about different words. And I think, so here's how I think about it. And again, I don't know if there's any validity to this, but to me, someone who's growing is just actually someone doing the work. So you could have the employee would be considered a grower in the greenhouse. To me, the farmer is the one who, and again, It could be like the farmers. I feel farmers are feeding people, but growers can be feeding people. To me, the farmer's more the one who's actually running the business, taking the risk. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't know. It made me think of something else too, because I think sometimes the people taking the risk really aren't much of farmers anymore. In that,
Yeah.
there are a lot of people that live in town and manage, have investments in farming enterprises. It happens throughout the country. We certainly have a lot of that in California.
Oh, absolutely.
And I look at some people as farmers that might be called farm workers.
Yes.
Because there may be a farm that I know several farms that have 300 employees.
Yeah.
And you can go out and speak to somebody who might have actually come here from Mexico, not that many years ago, perhaps. And they are just magicians in the farm.
Oh, absolutely.
They know the soil, they know the varieties, they can look at it, they know when it's ready, they've got instincts and knowledge and so forth. And they go home at night very proud of the fact that they were working outside and that they were helping grow this food. Now, there's a difference in the total amount of dollars probably brought in. But then there are people that are, as I've just described, that don't own it, but there's so much really, really outstanding farmers, and they are able to produce a good living for their family and have a mortgage and a couple cars and send the kids to college and all of that. And so I keep kind of struggling with how we have maximum inclusiveness. Because how strange is this to say that we've got people that were farming right now that were making $200,000 a year in Silicon Valley, and now they've moved off to the hills and they're making $60,000 a year and they're happier than they ever were. And then on the other hand, you have people that don't have a title to anything, that don't own the property, but are producing and are feeling huge satisfaction and are finding that they're good returns and able to take care of their family too.
Well, then, Rodger, back to you. What is a farm? Because you and I both have seen factories which I guess produce protein or produce lettuce. And I guess how does a family farm fit into all of this?
Yeah, you know what? I mean, I think it's a really good question. And I think that I think a farmer, and in fact, by the way, we started our consulting business is called Idea Farming. And the reason that we chose it to be called Idea Farming was we thought, as a farm, we'll take an idea and you plant the seed and you cultivate it and you take care of it and you bring it along and you harvest an idea. In that respect, an idea is not much different than a tomato. And so I would say that a farmer is often dealing with a renewable resource, is also bringing something, helping it grow and produce. And I do think that farmer today could be using some of these vacated shopping centers is what I think might be happening next. And I think that we'll see some of these shopping centers, we figured out that we don't need as many as we used to do. And I think you're going to see them growing leafy greens and other things in abandoned Nordstrom's department stores. And the people that work in there are farmers. And I think the other thing that I've been intrigued with too are people doing more grazing and appreciation for the fact we've had all these horrible fires here on the West Coast, and really better utilization or more utilization of grazing again, and recognizing that that's important too. I mean, they're farmers too, although you do get into a little tricky there. Some people, especially out west, prefer to be called ranchers than farmers.
Yes.
So you have to be able to do rancher/farmer, or something like that. But they're all, I think, farmers. I'm hard pressed to draw the line anywhere. Possibly it doesn't extend to having tomato plants on the balcony of your condominium. But I'm not sure. I haven't ruled that out yet.
Yeah. I mean, we're all part of the food production system, I guess, is where we can put it. But you're right. Where do you draw the line as a farmer?
Well, and we say food, and it's fiber as well too. Certainly,
Yeah.
we get into cotton, we get into wool. There's all sorts of hemp now.
Yep.
Producing hemp is becoming very, very big, and
Well,
so
and food is medicine too. So now we're producing
that's
medicine.
right, that's right, that's right. So it's really really fantastic. It's hard to get your arms around it because it's that classic, blind man describing the elephant sort of thing. Because it depends on where you are. Like you are based in Southern Ohio, and I'm out in California, and the agriculture is very different in all those areas. You got people that are listening to these stories around the world, it's interesting because the people can be inspired by what they're hearing of a large scale operator in California, or somebody that's in upstate New York that is just producing for a farmer's market. And there's something about that is appealing to each of them and appealing to consumers too. I think that the consumer side of this is that they sense that there's this passion, commitment, that there's something more than just trying to maximize profit, that there's people that are taking pride in what they're producing and not taking shortcuts.
I want to actually stop you right there, because I think that actually is one of the huge parts of what it takes to be a farmer, is that you're focused on that passion aspect, that doing better, of taking care of the earth, of regenerating the soil, I guess, as I would like to say. Because if you're just producing, you're just that cog in the wheel, I feel like that removes that whole aspect of passion. And you and I can both respect an artist who's got incredible passion and just is excellent at their craft. I mean, I look at some of these people that do woodworking. I love woodworking. I wish I had the patience to do some of these intricate projects that they do, but I respect that passion. And so I think that is such a huge part of how we view, and the passion of, building the soil up and growing that perfect head of lettuce, or as you said, larger scale, the ranching of, taking care of the, we have one person we interviewed, Glenn Elzinga, out in Idaho. He's on like 40 or 50,000 acres of ground. And he's just talking about how they're regenerating it, and the native wildlife is coming back and interacting with the wolves, and how they had to realize how to manage with the wolves actually, coming back into their area of Idaho. So I think that passion side is so key too.
Yeah, no, that it really is. And I'm wondering, when you talk about somebody that large, that's 40, 50,000 acres or something, they've got to have a couple hundred people down through their organization that include people that have as much passion as the person that had the title to the land. And it wasn't simply tied to the fact that they necessarily earned as a whole lot of money, but that passion element is something you can tell people either got it or they don't have it.
Yeah, and with Glenn too, is they actually rent most of their land. That comes from its Bureau of Land Management. And I forget how many cowboys they have, but the cowboys actually live with the cattle. They actually travel throughout that 46,000 acres. You've got to be committed for that.
No, it's and that's one of the things I've been really, really fortunate, because I've managed an organization in Indiana and the National Pork Producers Council in Des Moines, Iowa, and in the Rocky Mountain states, working with sheep ranchers that were all over the range states that had sheep herders that to get to where the sheep were, you had to trail for a whole day, leading the mules up to where a herder was in the mountains with 5,000 sheep. And then back into California, where we have larger scale and almonds and other things. And I've seen it everywhere. And I've and again, I guess I know it, and when I see it and feel it, and I've been fortunate to be able to do that. You're sensing this too, and I think consumers do too. And when consumers are showing an interest in caring about how something's produced, I have a hard time saying that, because it's not that there is a single right answer. It's kind of like they can accept any right answer if they can sense that it's no BS. And that's why, when you talk to people that go to farmers markets and you talk to the farmers and they come up and they'll say, well, are you organic or are you doing this or that? There almost is not a wrong answer if the farmer is able to explain why they're doing what they're doing. Now, that won't make the consumer an expert on that, but what it does is let them empathize with saying, well, this is a person with passion that cares and is doing something special because they care about their lettuce, they care about their pork, they care about how they're farming, they care about how they're treating people. And I want to support that. I want to buy food that is produced from people that care.
Yeah, that is so key. And I think too that it comes back, as you said, that story. So it comes back to just the marketing aspect, telling that story, and being able to have that personal connection with their farmer.
One thing I got to ask you about is that you're dealing with farmers that can't pay the bills on just feeling good, and that's where I wonder about, because to get into farming today, if somebody's going to get started, they have to have somebody make a deal that they can get, they can buy some land, or that they can rent some land or something, or space. I mentioned earlier, we might be farming in empty department stores, but I think that, so it's not easy getting in, and then it's not, and even though you're feeling really great about being able to work outdoors, or the satisfaction of producing something and feel proud of what you're producing, you got to make enough money to pay the bills.
Absolutely.
And so that's what I'm curious about, because you got all these people that are listening to you and you're talking to. How do you kind of help them through that transition?
Yeah.
They got to get some tough love every once in a while, don't they? And say, hey, fine, but there's a business, you got to pay the bills.
Yeah, and actually, I'm glad you brought that up, and it's actually kind of a little bit of a multi-step question. So, let's first talk about the getting into farming, because I think that's something that so many people, and I tell people, just start, because in the beginning, there's no wrong answer, there's no wrong thing. I mean, yes, you're going to fail. We all failed when we were starting. I have so many mistakes we made. Even this year, we do a little bit of wholesale cropping, and there's a few things I wish I had done differently even this year. But the thing with starting is, so many times you can get started on a lot less than you think. Up until last year, we're on a brand new farm. In the last couple of months, we bought 8 acres here in Ohio. We're building it out with a full scale farm and agritourism center. But I was farming in my backyard. We lived on the market, the main street through our little town, and we had a hoop house in our backyard. We were growing mushrooms in our basement, and we were feeding people in our community. And the other thing with it is, even if you can't farm yourself, there's a farm nearby that I guarantee will allow you to come help them farm. Obviously, I wish they would pay you. That's the goal, is that everyone should be reimbursed for their effort and their sweat of their brow. But even if you can't get paid, just being able to go experience and learn from them to get that beginning experience. Because one of the things, obviously, is access the funds. And one of the biggest things, if you want to go out and get a USDA microloan, which is a great way for farmers to get some initial capital, is they just want to see some experience. They want to know that you've got some traction through all of this. And so that if you can have a farmer sign off and says, yes, they've been working for me for a year or two, or have learned this and learned that, then it's a lot easier for them to get started up. But the other thing is, and we actually did a course, we just finished a course about this, as we call it the Start Your Farm Intensive, is it takes people from that idea to actually going through doing a business plan, to figuring out the financials, to finally going and getting funded. Because we realized that was such a holdup for folks, is that people, that whole idea of, oh my gosh, how do I put a business plan together? And I remember doing this in college. It took us an entire semester. It was one of the 2 college classes I actually finished. I only actually did 2. So I got an A on both of them. So I like to say I was a straight A student, even though I did only 2 classes in college. But it's that aspect. If you look at this 40-page business plan and you're completely overwhelmed, But what you have to realize is that how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So it's an accumulation of tiny little steps through this whole thing. So yes, how do you start a farm? It may look incredibly overwhelming, but I tell people, don't start raising chickens and don't go buy a $50,000 pickup truck. Those are my two rules. Don't do those.
Those are the two things I was going to do.
But everyone does that. And so,
yeah.
and with chickens is, chickens are hard to make money at a very small flock. And so people go, well, you can't make money on that, and they stop farming, or they tie up all their capital in either that $50,000 truck or making that now $800 a month payment for that truck. So, what I would say is to get started, just go out and start in your backyard, or go working with a farmer, or, again, there's so many free resources on YouTube, or with the podcast, your podcast, you have so many interesting guests that are coming on. So people just start listening to that and get those ideas flowing. And again, you're going to pick the idea that works for you, because newsflash, not every farm is going to be the same. I mean, you've worked in so many different industries in farming. I've worked with farmers, again, in just our little business, we have farmers doing aquaponics, mushrooms, flowers, herbs. We have them vegetables, meat. My brother out in Oklahoma, he raises sheep and cows and chickens. So there's so much a broadness out there, and your soil, your location is going to dictate so much of that, and every farm is not going to be the same.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, that was a great description that you were just kind of going through there, and it makes so much sense. You could just start that way. But then I think back, think of growing up in an area in central Illinois where they were all small farms originally. I think that, and there were people that were, when I was really, really young, that were still kind of getting by on 70, 80 acres or 100 acres. And that all went away because they could no longer make enough money. So it's really one of those things I still struggle with, because I thought, wait a minute, when it didn't cost a whole lot less and people could not stay in business, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, more than that, and they had to get out because, you just couldn't make a living on 75, 80 acres or 100 acres. Why is today different? And when costs are so much higher, why can you survive and prosper today on fewer acres than you could 50 years ago?
Well, that's a great question. I'm so glad you brought that up, because we work with farmers that are crushing it on sub-acre farms. What I mean is they're farming less than an acre, and they're making multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars. And obviously this year is a little unique because of COVID. Everyone went for the local food. But even in the last year, they were doing $300,000 on less than an acre. And so this year they're now up to about $400,000 on less than an acre, which blows my mind that you can do that. And it's not like they're just growing microgreens or just growing mushrooms in a building and that's how they're able to make it. They're actually doing like greens and root crops and things in the field. Obviously, growing protein products, the eggs, the chickens, pork, are much less intensive. So you have to have a lot more acreage. But the reason they're able to do that, there's two things. One, the rise of the internet, which allowed us to be so much more connected and sell very easy, which then brings up my second point, is they're selling direct to consumer. So what happened is the government decided that the best way to do it was to push everyone to grow commodity crops. And this obviously started, I feel, back in World War II, where we needed farms to produce massive quantities of a very few things that could drive the military industrial complex, which was needed to fight World War II. But the problem is we didn't shift back to being that very small farm selling to everyone in the neighborhood. It kind of kept going to sell wholesale, but you're at such a small scale, you can't make that, the margin gets thinner and thinner and thinner. And even my friend who has an 8,000 acre farm, the next town over, he's great. He's a good friend. I chat with him every once in a while. We talk about how things are doing. He has diversified his income. So he now not only has the 8,000 acres they farm, he has multiple rentals, which pay for things. He also has a grain elevator. So it has the elevator. He does custom spraying and work for his bigger operators. And so what it does is in the down years, he sells a few of his rentals, And then in the up years, he buys a few more rentals. And obviously, through the various business units, he's able to filter out the money. So I think, the aspect of, I think the broken cog in the wheel is the commodity aspect of it. And we know that that's broken too, because in some aspects, we're subsidizing a lot of the corn and beans. And obviously, I'm not saying it's across the board, the commodity is bad, because like almonds and stuff, I think some of those organizations are doing quite well. Still, obviously, you have to be very innovative in how you're doing it, and that firsthand. But I guess what I would say is the old model of being able to just sell, a few products to just a local distributor, because those distributors are taking more and more of that dollar. I think you may know the statistic, is it 17 cents that the farmer gets on average of the dollar in the retail store?
That's a really good example. I thought that was a great answer. I'm going to have to re-listen to this myself now that I put this podcast up, and I often don't get to listen to my own podcast that much after I get it edited. I want to hear you say that all over again, because I think that's a really good explanation. And I'm thinking, as you were saying that, here in Sacramento, for example, the UC Davis Hospital, which is our major big hospital here in Sacramento, the person who is Santana Diaz, who is in charge of it all, he's sourcing now directly from all local farmers within 75 acres. And for all they're producing for thousands and thousands and thousands of meals, they are sourcing much of it directly from farmers. Wow. So the farmers are making more money. They are really kind of cutting out some of the distributors going to those hospitals. And that's a model that can really happen virtually anywhere in the country. And so there's more money for the farmer, and when you can get those direct channels.
Now, there's two problems with this. One is farmers have to do what you're envisioning right there, and I think it's brilliant, and that's the way it needs to be, is the direct sales, is that farmers a lot of times are very independent, and they don't like to always play nice sometimes. And that, what I'm saying is they just love the aspect of producing 30, 50, 100 pallets of lettuce and it go out the door to one person. And so when you actually have to now build an office into the back end of the aspect of dealing with those smaller consumers, that is something that a farmer has to implicitly make that decision and embrace that, or else they're going to fail at that trying to do that. And so that's where some of these co-ops, like if you look at, let's say, Organic Valley was one of the first organic co-ops, and especially for milk, and now they've grown to other crops. But my friend Andre Kiltama, we've actually had him on the podcast here. He now has I think it's called Three Rivers Alliance co-op in New Hampshire, and they're doing very similar. So they're helping farmers, and they're kind of, the co-op now almost becomes that middleman, but now that's also taking a percentage of the sales too.
Sure.
But it comes back to, do you as a farmer want to get 100% and spend some hours in the office, or do you want someone to actually be doing those phone calls for you and give up a percentage of that? I don't know what's right now. I think it's every farm is going to be different. And, the beauty of this system is that allows that is, yes, you can sell your leeks directly to the hospital system, or you can have someone else. I obviously love to see a farmer getting maximum aspects, but I also do know in our work with farmers is when we run the pencil, marketing costs money.
Well, those are really good points. And the other thing I think of is that there's so much opportunity for grazing. I know something about where you're from, and I'll bet you can go out the front door and go down the road, and you can go by areas that could graze all kinds of sheep and goats and cattle, and there's woods and there's hills and there's all sorts of things we could do all over the nation. There's that potential. But if you're growing vegetables, most of the farmers have the capability, they can process them and take them and deliver them or work through a food hub or something. But if you're growing livestock, that's hard to do. It's hard to find places that you can take the livestock and have them slaughtered and cut into cuts and packaged and distributed. And there's so much opportunity there, but that strikes me as really one of the big gaps we've got throughout the country of having adequate local processing for the protein production.
Okay, so I'm glad you brought that one up too. So one of the things here in Ohio is we have this extension of metro parks. which is tens of thousands of acres, which have been wilded. And I mean, what they'll do is they'll buy up a new section of land and just let it go wild, which is great that we've got, you know, parks and people love them and they go mushroom foraging in them. But here's the thing. All that land could have cows and sheep grazing over it a couple times a year and actually improve the quality while producing beef for pennies.
Right.
Yeah, it blows my mind that we have all this acreage. And again, it's great. We enjoy them. But even the trees, I mean, sustainable timber harvesting is key. And you in the West Coast know better than anyone of having actually managed forests is so key. Here in Ohio, obviously we have enough rain. We don't get wildfires. But when a tornado comes through, we sure lose our shirt. You know, it lays down massive swaths because the trees are so big and so old. And you're right that we also are facing massive issues with the processing. And so I think, it's Thomas Massey and I think some of the other folks in Congress are trying to get the Prime Act passed. And what that allows is that, again, that connection of the farmer to the consumer with getting rid of the inspected slaughter plant so that you can, we have a local butcher here and he's not USDA inspected. So he's not selling direct to retail. He's selling basically, it's you bring the cow, I'll butcher it, I'll put it in packages, it's stamped not for resale, comes right back to you.
Right.
He is booked till February of 2022.
I can believe it. I went to a place in Pennsylvania that has a facility, and they are going through thousands and thousands of sheep a day that are well, no, maybe not a day, maybe it's hundreds a day, because they're people that are coming from New York and Philadelphia, and they take title to it, and they're assisted in the processing, and then they take the meat home with them, or take them back to the restaurants or stores. But they actually get around these other rules because they are taking title to it, and they're participating in the slaughter. But there's a huge demand. I mean, you know, you talk about something like this, there's just so much food available and so much that could be produced if we could solve some problems like you're saying, like the Prime Act. I ran into somebody in your neighborhood back there in that part of Ohio that was working on some technologies that was using in smartphones to be able to go into what were borderline locker plants and be able to use the smartphone to detect pathogens. So you could look for Salmonella, E. coli, Listeria, that sort of thing, and get instant feedback, again, running it off a smartphone, which kind of almost makes those small meat plants in some ways on an even keel with these large central slaughterhouses.
But Rodger, too, I mean, like, riddle me this. I mean, which are the meat plants which are having the outbreaks? It's the big ones. It's not these little ones. So we have a broken system already, and we're unfairly punishing the small plant. I mean, like, if you have you interviewed Greg Gunthorpe on the podcast?
No.
You definitely should. I'll try to hook you up. I've been trying to get him on my podcast for a while, and he's a very busy guy, especially since they completely had to pivot with COVID. But he tells the stories of just trying to work with their local USDA inspector, that the small plants just get the runaround. Polyface, you've interviewed Joel a few different times, and I had a conversation with him. Actually, I had a conversation with one of his team, because we know a lot of the team there at Polyface, and there's like, oh, we all of a sudden have all this fat in stock and we have all these livers in stock. And what was it? It was the inspector changed, and all of a sudden everything was safe again. It was personal preference. There's no standard in this. And so it's just based on how they're feeling that day.
Well, there is a variation like that. And there are people that take different commodity products to different parts of the country, even the world, for different grades. I mean, there's, you can end up producing almonds in California and put them on big containers and go in ships into Europe, and find that you will pass inspection in Spain, but not in the Netherlands or something. I'm just giving examples like that. And oftentimes what happens in those cases, they call it market rot. When the market goes the wrong way and they think, gee, I've spent too much money for this product, they'll just probe more and more until they come up with aflatoxin and say they can reject the load.
Oh
And
my
so,
gosh.
it's and then locally there's variations of that. When there were more packing plants around, you could say, you know what, I get a better USDA inspection and less likely to run into trouble if I go to Dubuque instead of, go to Sioux City. And,
Yes.
and so you still have the imperfections of having kind of humans that are
Yeah.
making some of these decisions and regulating these processes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wow, man, goodness. I tell you, I really enjoy having the conversation with you, Michael, because you've got answers to a lot of these issues, and you're getting me all excited. I'm thinking, I feel so badly that I'm not farming yet. I've been on the fringes now for decades, and I think that, okay, well, jump in. Going to go ahead and be a farmer like, the previous 10 generations of Wassons.
Yeah, well, you could be growing, mushrooms in your basement.
You don't know that much about California because we don't have basements in California.
Oh, okay. Yes.
We get slabs.
Yes. Actually, we only have a cellar. So I didn't learn about that till I came out here to Ohio because, in New York, we all have basements because we have a 4 or 5 foot frost line. So we've got to go deep. And so I didn't realize that cellars were just a little, you whacked your head every time. So
we have cellars, we just put wine in it. So
okay, yes.
Well, I tell you what, it's been great having a conversation with you. And I hope we can do it again. I feel like the journey that we're both on, it's exciting because there isn't anything as old as farming. Well, I mean, there must be, because farming's only been around for 10,000 years. In agriculture per se. But in the last 10,000 years, you can say, well, what's left? What's new? What's to get excited about? But I think we're both finding that there's quite a bit to be excited about and to be encouraged about.
Yeah, I am so interested in, the world of fungi. I'm just got on a recent fungi kick. And also just soil life in general. I mean, I think that right now is the unknown open range, the Western front, as it were, with agriculture, is understanding the micro size of everything. And that's what gets me so excited right now.
We're going to have another conversation about that because I just got off of a webinar about the microbiome. And I find that extremely interesting too, because there's so much to learn. And even people that have been farming forever don't quite understand this whole thing. And I just recently heard one report that was saying that as you start being able to measure the microbial life of your soil, that you could find that within an acre, there could be this 10 square foot area that needs 0 extra nitrogen and another that needs a lot more. And even how much they need of the different fertilizer reflects the health of the microbial health of the soil. And boy, as we get more and more to the point that we can measure it even precisely, and certainly some of these farmers that, like you were describing, they're making a good income off of 5 or 6 acres, are going to be able to get it down to knowing what an individual plant knows, let alone what a 5 square foot area of their 5 acre farm. And that frontier is just really, really exciting too.
Absolutely. So, all right, folks, if you want to listen to Rodger, because I know we're doing this for both of our podcasts, you can find him on the Farm to Table Talk podcast. And that's available on all podcast platforms. He's got a ton of excellent episodes. I look at his list of guests and I'm very envious that he scored so many of them. So, Rodger, thank you so much for this conversation. This has been fun.
Well, Michael, I hope everybody finds your podcast as I have now as well. And I'm just encouraged by what you're sharing. And I just love it that it's not just pie in the sky. I mean, you're able to connect this passion with people that are really making it work. And there's a lot of people that want to understand that. And I look forward to us having a conversation again sometime because it's been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And yeah, folks can find us at the thrivingfarmerpodcast.com. And we actually have another mini series podcast that we've been playing around with, which is kind of our personal farm journey, which is called the Starting the Farm on Central. So that's only a couple episodes in, but it's a lot of fun just to kind of share little like diary updates as we build out this new farm.
Michael, we're just going to have people going back and forth and listen to Farm to Table, listen to your podcast, and then we'll
yes.
I know you like to hear from people as I do as well, the other suggestions and stories, but I've enjoyed having the conversation. We look forward to having people listen to our conversation and doing it again with you sometime.
Absolutely. Thank you. Hey, Thriving Farmers. Next week on the podcast, I have Sarah Conley, who is a garlic farmer from Illinois. Now, Sarah, this year they had a little bit of a challenging season. Stuff didn't grow as well as they'd like. They had kind of drowned out last fall. So what they did is they went and turned it into more of a value-added crop. So they did some garlic bread, they did grilled cheese, garlicky grilled cheese, and they did drive-through. And Sarah comes on, shares about that. We talk all things growing garlic. She's in a third season, so she shares how she got started, some of what she's learned along the way. But it's a fabulous interview. Can't wait to share next week. Sarah Conley from Conley Farms. So there you have it, another episode in the books. So I'd love if you would hop on over to iTunes and leave us a rating and a review. Those mean everything to us. We love to hear what you're thinking. If you have a podcast guest that you can recommend, please pop on over to the Thriving Farmer Podcast website and leave us a review. That's thrivingfarmerpodcast.com.